Alright, hey, I'm making this video because Jack asked me, or I said I would do it. No one asked me to do it, but I said I would do it. Basically just like camera settings, compositor settings, shader settings for getting these like kind of like greasy looking distorted textures. Or yeah, textures. Fuck it. For these renders that I've been doing. I guess the thesis or whatever. The reason I do them this way is kind of trying to take advantage of like quote unquote like satisfying renders, like the stuff that's like super subsurfacey, super lens distortiony, a lot of Fresnel, like these things that just like like a looping Instagram video that look like goo porting out of a cylinder or whatever, but like all the materials and shading looks really nice. So kind of take advantage of that, making it kind of gross also, and hopefully like absurd to an extent because just like bumping it up and going ham. But I guess also sort of just like, I don't know, self-aware, trolly. I don't know what would you call it. If I showed like these renders to like people who are super super into like shader code or whatever, they'd probably like scream and shriek because they'd notice stuff like lens distortion, and that's like a faux pas or whatever. But whatever, I'm not one of those people. So, anyways, let's get into it. So I just opened the scene. I'm looking at it in cycles. And I bumped up the HDRI for the world lighting to full strength, which when I'm making shaders or materials and like getting like before I worry about lighting, I just like put one of these in here because if you can, you know, like this, like the naked object, without any material or anything will look good in these lighting conditions. So it's kind of like ideal. Might have to adjust some stuff once you have like your lighting all set up, but for the most part, you can just kind of like set it and forget it. So that's how we're gonna look at it. So this is like the material for the skin. It's pretty simple. A little more involved than the way I usually do it because I would normally just like have it be all one like solid like value, but I wanted to do a little extra this time. So the R, the color, and some of the values in here are ran by image textures, controlled by image textures, which I just painted directly in Blender. Nothing fancy. Not even, just like warm where the areas are warm, cool where I want them to be cool. The lips, you can just, what I did, it's super easy. I just do this. Okay, so you just like brush on with the paintbrush and then you use the smear tool. Smear, smear, smear. And it ends up looking kind of like like lip ridges, whatever. Anyways, there's that. In a lot of cases, I'll use an ambient occlusion node, which looks like that. You can set it to only local to not have it fucked with by other objects in the scene. So it's just like the occlusion from the object itself and not other objects in the scene. And then I have found that instead of using like a color ramp node to crunch the values down, using a power node works. One is like normal, and then you can like shoot it up really high to get more ambient occlusion range, more of a range. This clamp is on a lot of nodes, and it does what it says. Clamps result of the node to 0 to 1. You might have to do this like if you're like setting like a roughness or one of these values that just expect 0 to 1. I don't know how much of a actual difference it makes, but try to use it because if you get like unexpected results, something looks weird, it might be because of that. I don't fucking know. Okay, multiply. This is a mix RGB set to multiply to control the amount of ambient occlusion information is baked in to the base color. And next is just the Fresnel node going to the subsurface. So Fresnel, as I'm sure most of you are aware, just kind of giving you information light to dark on like the outside edges to the inside of the object. And some of the aspects of the principal BSDF allegedly have like Fresnel, whatever math running in the background. I think roughness is one. Uh, but whatever. I don't know why I'm talking about that. So I'm sending that to a map range node so I can just keep like, you could also use a color ramp, but I like using the map range because I like knowing what these values are if I need to copy or paste them to another thing. And I mean, I guess the disadvantage of using a map range node is it's maybe harder to see the differences between the two, but I think it ends up being like more controllable than a color ramp. And also the position on the color here, I'll just one of my issues with the color ramp is there's no input for position or color for either of these two, or however many whatever you call them handles. So I like using this one because if you have like a bunch of these and you want them all to be similar, you can I guess this minimum and maximum would be more or less the yeah, I think this would be like the color, and then this would be like the position. So like min would be like this one's position, max, this one's position, min, this one's color, max, this one's color. Obviously only works for gray values, but that's most of the use cases for color ramps. So for me. So anyways, this is going, you can do this kind of thing for all sorts of things. For right now, this is going into the subsurface value. This is important, I think. A really long time, I was really confused about why, when I made subsurfacey materials, they didn't really work the way I expected them to in Blender. And that's because like this radius thing, it's like the RGB values are like how much influence. I'm not even sure the right terms, but it's like how much when light shoots through the object, it's going to be red. How much is going to be RGB, how much is going to be green, how much is going to be blue. Often I'll just like set this all to like, I don't want to fuck with it. So maybe I just forgot to do it this time. I'll just set all to like 0.5 or something. And then that way, the color I'm sending it is like, and I'm not going to get any like unexpected changes from the colors that I'm sending it. But I'm actually going to put this like back more to where it was because, I like the way it was looking. You can see it's like already making these like kind of wacky changes. I think the way it is normally is like 1.1.1, which I think is like maybe common for like skin, probably like white people's skin. So that might not be what you want. That's rarely what I want. So if you just want full control with the color, you can set these all to the same value, which I usually just do 0.5 or something, but you can, I don't know, whatever. Do your own research on that one. Here's my SSS color, or subsurface color. Much redder and pinker. That's pretty much it. Next, we'll do the roughness. I made a roughness map, again, mostly just focusing on making the lips more glossy. Putting it through a map range node the way I did with the Fresnel up here. And then the last is the bump. I made a bump map just to try to get that like etching into the lips. And then also on the bump is this Musgrave texture. Because you can kind of stack bump maps if you put them into the normal, which I didn't know for a long time. I think that makes it like maybe a little more confusing if you're baking these, or maybe not. Yeah, you can break that as a normal. It'd be fine. Forget I said that. Okay, let's just start at the beginning. I'm using object coordinates into a noise texture, then mixing that noise texture using the linear light mix RGB to kind of distort the coordinates. And the reason I'm using linear light is because if you use just like a multiply or something, I'm pretty sure, maybe not. Maybe I could use a multiply. Let's go with, for the point of demonstration, generated. Anyways, whatever. One of these, it'll like the noise if you're multiplying it, it'll make the coordinates like drift up or down. I think it's like a common thing when you're doing like shader math. So you probably already know about that. But the linear light will kind of clamp it to the center. So you don't even need to worry about anything. And so yeah, you can use a noise texture to distort these object coordinates or whatever coordinates, texture coordinates. So I guess if you're making something like more organic, it can be useful. I use like a setup like this often. So just going to a Musgrave texture that's scaled really high. Just do a slight bump, just to add like a bit of noise and break up the reflections. And it's going mixing with the bump for the lips. It's going into here. It's all going into this texture. And everything else is set default. You can maybe fuck with the transmission, and you can maybe fuck with IOR to get something that looks different, but this looks good enough. And I think you can see like on these like Rembrandts, which I think is what this area of the face is called. Because of like the triangle. Maybe it's only if there's like that. Maybe there's the triangle of light here is called a Rembrandt. Under the eye, between like under the eye to the nose, cheekbone, because I guess those showed up in Rembrandt paintings a lot. Anyways, I used to think that if objects were gonna do subsurface scattering right, they had to be solid. I don't really know if that's true. Maybe in other versions it was. This looks good enough for now. All right, let's move on. The eyes I did in kind of like a weird way because I've been trying to think of my models more as like toys. So the eyes I kind of put behind these lenses, which have like a lot more visual information than like just like a mucous membrane, kind of like iridescent looking, which is a pretty simple technique that I think looks really good. So let's start with that. Because I use this a lot. So here it's the same noise texture going into a linear light, which is mixing with the facing on the layer weight, which you can control that with like blend. But I like this because it just distorts that facing value, which, you know, is like center of where your camera is facing, blushed out. So you can like swirl that around a little bit. Let's go back to how it was. And then this is like the magic node. It's a color ramp, and you set this to HSV, hue saturation value. And you set this to far. And then you make the two handles the same color, and then you can push them around, and it'll run through like the whole. Because the saturation, yeah, it'll run through like all the hues in between the two of them. So you get like this like crazy like Predator style like heat map looking color information that changes with your facing value or where your camera is facing. And you can also do this with the Fresnel. It just depends on like what look you're going for. I'll use either of them. And then I just like multiply that with another color, or sometimes even just mix it. And usually I'll like go like really, really subtle because it just adds like a little bit, especially if you're doing like metals or plastics or anything that could be construed as like oily or shiny. I feel like just like having like a little, even if it's like really subtle difference on the surface, adds a lot. And this is like a really simple way of doing it. Other than that, I have the same noise texture going into a map range, which is controlling the IOR, which is the index of reflection, or refraction maybe, index of reflection, I think. So it's just like where the way, here, I'll just show you. So it controls like the way the light reflects or like the angle. I'm not really sure, but it's a good way of getting like glass and transmissive materials to kind of like look wiggly and broken up. Everything else is just like the transmission's up all the way, alpha's down a little bit, so you get some transparency. And that's really it. It's just supposed to look kind of like gross, oily plastic. Then these little red rims are just like a subsurfacey solid color. Pretty simple. The eyes are broken up into several, so we'll just start. Back of the eye, it's just, what do we do? Coordinates, gradient texture, color ramp to invert that and kind of crunch it. Another color ramp to set the two values. That goes into the base color and the emission color. Subsurface, a little bit of that on there. The shine, these like blobs that are just kind of like, baked in reflections, just an emission with Fresnel controlling the strength. The pupil, just like solid dark color, using that same gradient. And the iris, using that same gradient, setting the two ends to these two different colors, and then base color and emission. Everything else is pretty much the same. Just trying to give it like a doll-like, anime-like stare. Anything else to show? I think that's it. This is not in the render. All right, the hand. That's pretty much the same with a little more subsurface, but it's just a color map here. And I think this is also, yeah, I sculpted it. Give it the like scar. Pretty quick and dirty, but it works. And okay, yeah. So let's unhide that stuff, and then the camera settings. I usually keep the focal length like pretty close to 100 to give it like a macro lens look, because I feel like that kind of is like a good starting place to make everything look smaller than it is, kind of like a miniaturization vibe. You might like notice some of these might look different than your settings because I have some plugins, but I'm not using any of those for this scene. So, whatever. We'll get into it. Shift X and Y are just without changing the perspective of the camera, a way to like kind of pan around the shot. So, I have these guides, which might be kind of difficult to see. These are rule of thirds and center guides. So I'll kind of set up my shot as close as I can to how I want it, and then shift around. Clipping, yeah, whatever. You know about that. Depth of field. This is important. Yeah, I have a plugin that like lets you show the focus plane, but that's it. You can just set that with a target, a focus object target. F-stop, this is all just like camera shit. Lower the f-stop, the shallower the depth of field. That's really it. So shallow f-stop, depth of field. We'll give it that like kind of blurry quality as well. Lights are just like a really simple like tube light setup. Rim light, fill light. Put a ground plane to reflect shit, but I don't even think it matters because it's so far away in the scene. And then, yeah, also with regards to lighting, I think I already mentioned, but the HDRI, once I'm ready to work on lighting, I'll just like set this really low. So it's still kind of there if I need some visual interest in the reflections and stuff, but it's not contributing that much. And since this is a dark scene, that's like what I need. So keep that where it's set. Render settings, pretty much all the same. No denoising in this one, though I will use that, and I can show that next, in the next scene. But yeah, these are all pretty much basic. I set my samples lower than they are by default because I feel like I don't need them that high, so 128, 64. I feel like whenever they go above this, it just like doesn't matter. It just takes longer. For me, at least. What next? Print. I mean, this is just like, I'll probably, if I was like gonna make like, if I like put this up on my website or ArtStation or something, I'll re-render it out at a higher quality, but still same aspect ratio. 16-bit color. I don't think it really matters that much. And if you put anything into Photoshop, it'll end up getting crunched down to 8 anyways, but fuck it. Okay, passes. This is important. So these are your render passes. I try not to fuck with different like render layers or view layers or whatever. Sometimes it's necessary, but it just adds complexity to a project that I don't want to fuck with. So for passes, I kind of just pump out everything I can, even though I rarely use like the crypto mat or any of these lighting passes. But they can come in handy. And if you're doing like an animation, it can be good just to have all of those so you don't have to re-render. But these are important. And the environment, I'll say, down here, if you're doing like a transparent scene, environment might be, that's your background. So that might be important to put out. So yeah, the data, these are the important ones. So you want combined Z and vector, which I think it gives by default. And then I'll also put out the denoising data because for certain renders, I like to mix the noisy one with the denoised one so I control the level of like noise in the image. Because, sometimes it looks good to have a little bit of noise in your render. I think it does. Anyways, compositing now. Oh, I'll run a quick render so you can see it in the backdrop. Okay, we're back. So I just ran the render again really quick so that it'll show up in the compositor. This is the compositor. If you haven't seen it before, you get it through, it's here. Shift F3, use nodes and backdrop to see it, and then don't know why. It's just like one of those little annoying things about Blender. Apparently this makes it run way faster if you just check this OpenCL. It's not on by default, so you just have to remember to do that. Or figure out a way to make it default in your default scene, which I have not done. So anyways, I'll just walk through the nodes that I like to use, and bear in mind that this is 101. I'm using that Node Wrangler plugin that comes native with Blender that lets you have all sorts of handy shortcuts in all the node editors. So I'm really only using 2 of the passes, just the vector, which actually is wrong. I should be using the depth. The only ones I really like use, oh Jesus fucking Christ. Sorry. The only ones I ever really use all the time is like image, depth, vector. All of these outputted, I just kind of have on by force of habit, even though I like rarely use them. And then like I said, I'll use the denoising. Let's go down. I'll just show it really fast. We'll walk through all of these in a flash. I can see the ambient occlusion being useful, maybe. That looks sick. The denoising might be useful. Sometimes I'll like mix a denoised image with the regular image to get a partially denoised image, but I'm not doing that here. So first it's just a simple hue saturation to tweak the values, brightness and contrast to do the same. I have like a view safe monitor now because my eyes, like it hurts my fucking eyes to look at this shit all day, but I always forget to turn it off, so like things end up looking different, like a lot more saturated. I always forget to turn it on when I'm doing stuff like this, or turn off the eye safe mode, I mean. Anyways, if a node is like grayed out like this, it means it's muted. Just the key M mutes or unmutes in Node Wrangler. So this is the defocus node. It's really useful. It's basically just like it basically does what depth of field does in just like the cycles interface, whatever, the camera settings. So like if we look at the camera, the depth of field, the f-stop, it's kind of the same controls as, or similar enough, the controls of this. I'm not using it, but I use it in a lot of renders just because it gives you like an extra level of like fine tuning. I find that, so you plug the image in the depth in, and that will, because the depth is like how far deep your image goes. You can use the Z buffer, and then the f-stop, maximum blur, threshold. These all are kind of like self-explanatory, I feel like. I pretty much only ever use this f-stop and the max blur. Bokeh type is like what shapes the blurs are, and so the reason this is kind of different is it's not like a simple Gaussian blur of the pixels. It kind of like adds this like Here, I'll just bring this value really low so you can like see it. Maybe a little more. I find that this node is kind of hard to use because these f-stop values don't really correspond to like physical values at all. I feel the same about like the camera setting one, but the camera setting one is maybe a little closer. Okay, so you can see like where the bokeh is happening, maybe. Might be hard to see. Anyways, it's just like adding circles where the bokeh is. Not using this for this project, but I use it in most, which is why it's like part of the setup, and I just have it muted. I'll just mention another helpful node, which I use mostly for animation, not so much for still images, is this vector blur. You send it the image, the depth, and the speed, which is the vector, and then what you get is it's motion blur. I don't know why it's called vector blur and why these names are different. It's motion blur. And the reason I like doing it in here is I feel like trying to set the motion blur in the camera settings are in the cycle settings. I like don't know what like it's so hard. You can't like in real time tell what any of these settings do. So it would just be running renders and guessing. This makes it so you can just run it in post processing. So you can dial in this like blur and speed, whatever you need. It's a really helpful node, more for animation than still images, but still images too. For this, it doesn't. I don't need any motion blur for this, so I'm not using it. But I thought it would be bear mentioning. Next, I add usually 3 glares, fog glow, streaks, and ghosts. This one has the fog glow muted, but I will, for intents and purposes, show it. So the glare is just kind of, our fog glow is just kind of like traditional like blurriness around like the glowy parts. The threshold, of course, sets what parts are affected. So higher the number or lower the number, more lower is a threshold. You know what that is. The lower the number, the more is coming through. And when I'm fine tuning this, I'll set the mix up to 1 just so I can really tell. It's like the quality, the size, yada yada yada. Pretty self-explanatory. And then set it back down to 0. And if you want it to be contributing less, you can go to the negative. The next one is streaks, which gives it these like starbursty shapes. I think there is one that's just simple star, but this is nice. You can control like the number of streaks, the angle offset. Fade is like how some of these controls are kind of confusing, but I guess fade is like how much it's overlapping the image. I like this color mod setting a lot because it kind of like starts to separate the colors out. I really like the way that looks. I think it's really pretty. Iterations is like similar to quality, I think. Quality, it's all the same. Glare Ghosts is this like wacky one that I really like using, but I think most people might find it distracting. It is kind of hard to find like the best cases for it, but it just kind of adds these like weird like almost like lens flares. And it has the same kind of like color mod and threshold settings. If I do use this, in this one I'm using it at like, mix 0, but I'll often go into the negatives. The last one is the lens distortion, which I always set to fit. And then this is just like, your chromatic aberration, your lens distortion. I set it really high to demonstrate, but yeah, just like how much it bubbles out and how much the colors like separate. That goes in the compositor and the viewer. That's really it. It's a pretty simple node setup. I think I pretty much have this going with some difference in values for every render I do. I think it just adds like a murkiness and more of that kind of like Vaseline-y quality, especially with the glares. I really like the way Blender handles these. I know that like After Effects and stuff might have like more fine tuning and controls, but there's something really satisfying about being able to do everything in the same program and about like getting your render out exactly the way you want it to look. It's just less work, I think. So that's mostly it. I'm gonna go into another scene because whoever is named like red, green, 1, 2, 3 or whatever. Sorry if I don't remember it exactly. In the Discord server, so they liked the material on another thing I showed, which is pretty much the same as this eye lens material, but I'll just go into that completely. Um, oops. So this is the render. My plan is to have like more of these figures in like an actual space, but I'll just go through the material settings and stuff. This model, it's just like a tweaked model from Make Human. This is actually, I did this in Marvelous Designer. You could easily do this in Blender. I just like, this is something I was trying to bust out quickly. The lighting and stuff, the camera settings, like pretty much exactly the same as you saw last time. 100mm lens, shallow depth of field, f-stop, whatever. Spotlight, point light underneath to get some like kind of force some reflection back up. Ground plane, target for all of these things. Materials. So I think the only thing that was really of interest is the cloak. Everything else is pretty standard. It's just like subsurfacey. And then shit. Fuck. God damn it. I hate when I accidentally hit the look dev mode because it takes so long to fix. And I don't like using look dev. Right. So, and then this is just like I just used on the object coordinates and HDRI. No one asked for this information. Object coordinates to environment texture on this, baked it to the UVs so that it wouldn't distort when the armature moves. But you wanted to know about the cloak. This is like the same pretty much as the lenses in the last thing I showed. Facing angle. Going into an HSV far color ramp. Same values on either side. Runs through the entire hue spectrum. Between them, you can crunch it if you want. Don't feel like crunching it. Mixing it with like another pale color. Multiplying it with the ambient inclusion, which has a power node to kind of bump that up. And that's all going into the base color. Other things of interest, roughness set really low. Sheen for fabrics. I've heard that setting the sheen to 1 is good. I don't know. I think it kind of like just, I don't know what it does. Apparently it's good for fabrics, so I just use it. Whatever. Bumped up the transmission a little bit and the alpha a little bit, which I don't think is really making a difference right now, but just kind of would like make it look a little gauzier maybe. We'll leave it how it is because I like how it is. A little oily. Anyways, the last thing is for fabrics, what I like to do is I'll use a magic texture, which gives you kind of like this, like, if I bump the scale down, you'll be able to see, or up. Nope, down. Yeah, just kind of gives you this like weird, wacky, like woven, wacky shit, which is pretty, but doesn't look immediately useful to me. But the factor, so just like the black and white values, and if you set this like whatever to what it was, let's just walk it back. Sorry for this. Yeah, so if you just set it to a high enough value, it like looks woven. It's super easy. And then just like a low strength bump map to get that shit. And then I only ever use the strength on the bump because the distance I don't ever really notice doing anything. But that's something I guess to look into. And in any case, that's like it. That's super it. This like I'll say that this setup does a lot of work for me. I get a lot of like materials that I really like the way they look out of like doing the Fresnel or facing into a color ramp like this and mixing it with another color just to get this like subtle like iridescent quality. I think that's like super simple to set up and looks really good. So, that's really it. I hope I answered your questions and was coherent. If y'all want to see or hear anything else, feel free to let me know. Yeah, thanks for your kind comments, and I hope this was helpful. All right, bye.